All right, we are jumping in to lands and colorless, and that is going to round out the card by card rating for Homelands limited formats. I'm kind of focused on draft, but also sort of applies to sealed as well. And let's just take it from the top here. So on Hava Township, this is a cycle of uncommon lands. These are the color fixing tri-lands of this format. Taps for a colorless. You can pay 1 and tap and get a green. Or you can pay 2 and tap and add red or white. So all of these are allied color tri-lands. So, white, red, green, that's going to be Cabaretti, right? Ace and Abbey, it's going to be, white, blue, green. That's going to be the Brokers. Castle Singer, blue, black, red. That's the Maestros. Koskin Keep, I got black, red, green. That's the Riveteers. And Wizard School, white, blue, black. That's Obscura. And that's what they call all the 3 color pairs that are allied colors. The names come from Streets of New Capenna. So this means that when you're using one of these lands, it works better if they're an allied color pair because at least one of those colors is just, a mana converter. 1 and tap, add a mana. If you're using these for an enemy color pair, then it's costing you some mana to do that. It's 2 and tap to add enemy color pairs like red and white, or green and blue, etc. Now, that might not sound very good, and to be truthful, it's not very good, but this format is incredibly slow. It's very slow, and you're going to get to the late game, and you're going to have time, and that means you might as well run these. Especially if you are a multicolor deck, there is precious little color fixing that exists in this format. There are these lands, right? This cycle of uncommon lands. There's renewal in green, right? 3 mana sorcery. So if you're in green, you can do it. You can make a multicolor deck. And blue has Jinx. Jinx is kind of better for getting Marjan to attack or setting up like a big alpha strike of white creatures with Ace and Highway. Jinx could theoretically fix your mana for a turn and draw you a card if you were desperate. Really, though, it comes down to renewal in green and this cycle of lands. And the format's very slow, and the board reaches a stalemate pretty quickly. So you'll have time to make your land drops, get the mana flowing for these lands, and turn on your colors. So however bad they might look, if you're making a 3-color deck in particular, you got to bite the bullet and do it. So, for a 2-color deck, I'd say, these are about a 2. Depending on how much you feel the need to be able to hit the right color of mana at the right time, especially into the late game. A 2-color deck is probably about a 2. On a 3-color deck, I would say they're just critical, like a 3. Always makes the cut in a 3-color deck that is those 3 colors on that land. Just kind of have to do it. There's not too much more to say about them. They're slow, but they're effective for this format. All right, Apocalypse Chime. This is a rare, and this is one of the great bomb rares of the set. So pay 2, tap, sacrifice Apocalypse Chime at instant speed. Destroy all non-token permanents with a name originally printed in the Homelands expansion. They can't be regenerated. So other than token creatures, and there are not many ways to get token creatures, and of the ones that do exist, like, say, Singular Autocrat or Drudge Spell, when the card that made those tokens leaves, you sacrifice the tokens. So Apocalypse Chime in this format basically kills everything. It even blows up these lands. Right, this uncommon cycle of lands blows them up too. It's just an absolutely crushing symmetrical sweeper. I guess you give it a 5 in this format. You need to know that it exists, and you need to know that, if it's in your deck, you need to kind of, play a little game with the opponent where you commit as little to the board as possible, while the opponent maybe is going wide trying to get around your blockers. And after the opponent's overcommitted and you've kind of undercommitted, you blow the Apocalypse Chime for just 2 mana, and it's probably very, very late in the game because of how much the game stalls. Then you play out a couple of creatures, 2, 3 creatures from your hand the same turn, pass it back to the opponent. That's probably good enough to win. Yeah, this is just an absurd sweeper. For this format, goes in any color. I give it a 5. Just ridiculous bomb. Don't have much more to say about the lands here. The art's kind of cool. All right, into some artifact creatures here. Clockwork Gnomes. This is a common. It's a 2/2 for 4. You can pay 3 and tap to regenerate target artifact creature. That includes itself. So because that includes itself, and because the other artifact creatures are actually pretty good, yeah, Clockwork Gnomes, once you get it down, it'll block all day. It'll block all day, and it'll keep your other artifact creatures alive. The opponent might be able to, sneak some damage in when you don't have the mana open, or they might be able to get -1 counters, or, maybe they tap down your creature. And notably, like most of the cards in this set, it doesn't play quite as well when there's Giant Oyster. Right, Giant Oyster is just waiting for anything of yours to tap. So that's a problem. But overall, I think Clockwork Gnomes is... I think I'm going to give it... since it can just go in any deck and regenerate itself, I think I give it a 2.5 here. And if you have more of these artifact creatures that you're prioritizing, then it quickly bumps up to a 3 at that point. Yeah, it's pretty good. All right, Clockwork Steed. This is a common. So Clockwork Steed and Clockwork Swarm are very similar cards. They're both 0/3s for 4, colorless. They both come in with 4+1+0 counters. They both wind down at end of combat by removing one of their power counters. And on your upkeep, you can pay X and tap them to wind them back up, but it can't go above 4 counters. The difference between them is Clockwork Steed can't be blocked by artifact creatures, which is nice. The artifact creatures in the set are pretty good. Clockwork Swarm can't be blocked by walls. There are some good walls in the set, but more importantly, Clockwork Swarm has a combo that we're going to talk about in a minute with Joven's tools. So anyhow, both of these come down as 4/3s, and 4/3s for 4 mana is above rate, even with the winding down of the counters that happens. A 4/3 for 4 is above rate in this format. And it can go into any color of deck, which is really nice. The 3 toughness in particular matches up nicely with the removal in the format. So, it'd take like a full run of serrated arrows to kill one. They both have abilities that make them a little bit harder to block, which is nice. Of the two, I think the Clockwork Swarm is more powerful because of the combo with Joven's tools. But they're both extremely serviceable. I think I give Clockwork Steed a 3 because you need some really high card quality to beat out the Clockwork Steed for a slot in your deck. All right, dropping down a 4/3 on turn 4, that is very powerful in this format. Clockwork Swarm, I'm going to rate even more highly. I'm going to give this, I think, because of the combo with Joven's tools, I think I'm going to give this a 4. Right, Joven's tools is kind of like sort of good in most of the decks, but it doesn't get you past walls. But Clockwork Swarm steps that up to become unblockable. Not like unblockable if they have a plains, or unblockable if they don't have a flying creature, or unblockable if the wind is blowing right on a Sunday afternoon and you've got a snow-covered plains. No, nothing like that. Just Clockwork Swarm, activate Joven's tools, it's unblockable. And basically, most of the things like this in the format still get stopped by Giant Oyster. But you can find a way around Giant Oyster, right? You could have Roots from green, and Roots can lock down a Giant Oyster. You could have Bestiary in white. You could lock down a Giant Oyster. You could have Torture in black that kills a Giant Oyster. As long as you can clear that out, and clear the path for the Clockwork Swarm to come across, there's a very real chance that you could win with combat damage. It'll be slow, because Joven's tools is 4 mana to activate. I'll have to wind the Clockwork Swarm back up eventually. But it's a way to win with combat damage in this format. And I think that makes it deserving of a 4 as its rating. And like the Clockwork Steed, if you don't have Joven's tools, it's probably still a 3. It's probably still worth your time. Alright, Didgeridoo. This is a 1 mana rare artifact. You can pay 3 and put a Minotaur permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. That's interesting, but what it really does for you is it gives your Minotaurs flash, and it reduces their mana cost by 1, and kind of takes the colored mana requirements out of it. It doesn't give you any card advantage. It can let you flash in blocking Minotaurs, and that's kind of neat. But the games go so long in this format that I think most of the time you could have, over the course of the long game, just committed all those Minotaurs onto the battlefield anyway. So Didgeridoo's pretty niche, even in the deck that wants it. I'm going to call it a 0.5. That's being a little generous. Alright, we've got a comment here. It's Ebony Rhino. 7 mana. It's a 4/5 with trample. So Ebony Rhino is one of the biggest creatures in the format. There's like a couple of 5/5s, a 6/2, an 8/8. But really, Ebony Rhino's one of the biggest creatures in the format. blocks just about anything of the opponent's all day long. Is not the worst attacker. Wouldn't be too bad with trample to put Feast of the Unicorn on this and crash in. And just because it's individually, a large threatening creature as a single card, it's better than most of the other things you could be playing because you have so much time in this format to set up, get your board, um, get all your mana, get all the pieces together. It wouldn't surprise me at all if you could run like 6 copies of Ebony Rhino and be just fine in this format. Because board stalemates just linger forever. So I think most of the time you're just going to want this. It can go into any color of deck. I think Ebony Rhino's about a 3.5. It's not quite up there with the greatest bombs, but it is kind of a bomb. Trample is sort of a form of evasion, and there are ways to take advantage of it, like Feast of the Unicorn. So, certainly not the worst. And I think you could run a deck full of 7 drops with how slow this format is. Like, if anyone remembers Rise of the Eldrazi, and how that format had all kinds of defenders and high toughness creatures, and you could either like Voltron a creature up with auras or equipment, or you could, make a level up creature, gain a bunch of levels and pump a bunch of mana into it, or you could, stall and get mana acceleration and get to like Eldrazi that cost, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 mana. Homelands is kind of like that. Yeah, you got time. You've got time. Which means Ebony Rhino is actually quite good. Not the best, but quite good. And can go into any color. So, yeah, I'd be picking these over a lot of other things in the format. One downside to note about artifact creatures here is I think it's Chandler in red is the one who blows up artifact creatures. He's a common, and if your opponent is in red, then they very much have access to Chandler. They probably have a Chandler or 2 floating around their deck. Need to be aware of that. So if your opponent is in red, you might want to keep some of your really premium removal handy to throw onto that Chandler to stop him from, blowing up all of your prime Ebony Rhinos that you could otherwise, go wide with in the late part of the game and trample over a win. Moving on, Feraz's Ban. It's a rare, it's 6 mana, artifact. Creature spells cost 2 more to cast. So at 6 mana, this is kind of coming down too late in the game to impact the format enough. Now people are trying to hit 5, 6, 7, 8 mana creatures in this format. The format lends itself to going extremely late. So you could tax the opponent some extra and set them back and keep them from double spelling, etc., even into the late stages of the game. Unfortunately, this is a symmetrical effect. It also affects you. So I'm going to give Feraz's Ban a 0.5. It's probably more like a 0, and move along. Here we are, Joven's Tools. It's an uncommon 6 mana artifact. Pay 4 and tap. Target creature can't be blocked this turn except by walls. Except by walls. And Clockwork Swarm can't be blocked by walls. So, this is the unblockable combo in artifacts that I was talking about. Joven's Tools, by modern standards, is outrageously expensive. Just a mana sink to end all mana sinks. But it's so impossible to get through for combat damage in this format The board just stalls up and locks up to the point that, there's a very real chance that a blue deck can mill you out if they've got a lot of giant oysters. Because of how incredibly defensive this format is, Joven's Tools is going to see some use. Now, there are some walls. Right, there's a Cemetery Gate in black. There's Dark Maze in blue. So you could get tripped up with some creatures using Joven's Tools. Not the Clockwork Swarm, though. That combination is unblockable. And it's not the worst clock, either. I mean, it takes a little while to get the mana online for Joven's Tools, but once it's there, the clock isn't that bad. Joven's Tools, the first copy, having one copy somewhere in your deck, is really quite good. It's one of the only ways to break a board stalemate. It's probably like a 3.5, maybe a 4. And this might sound crazy, but I don't think 2 copies would be too many for a deck either, right? Maybe the opponent has 1 wall, but maybe they don't have 2 walls. Or maybe you've got 2 copies of Clockwork Swarm. It just depends on the makeup of your deck, whether you want a second copy of Joven's Tools or not. But there's a lot of trying to figure how you can get through possibly in any way to win the game. Joven's Tools is one of the key pieces of trying to do that in this format. So it's crucial. And it's like 3.5 or a 4. Pretty handily. Right, land. Roterothopter. This is actually not bad. It's common, 1 mana. It's a 0/2 Thopter, has flying. And already as a 0/2 flyer for 1 mana, it pretty handily blocks most of the common and uncommon flyers. Does not deal with a Leaping Lizard. Right, you need 4 mana open in order to trade with a Leaping Lizard. It also does not deal with Abbey Gargoyles. Aside from that, though, Roterothopter is going to keep all those other little flyers off your back. And being able to pump it up to a 2/2 flyer means it can crash in a similar way to Leaping Lizard. It's more mana intensive than Leaping Lizard, but shares a lot of the same qualities. So, I think Roterothopter's like, this is going to sound a little insane. I think it might be like a 4. Because it has the functionality to be a 2/2 flyer. That's just really solid in this format, and it can go in any color and do it. Yeah, I really like Roterothopter for this format. It's a incredibly solid blocker and not the worst attacker either. Like I said with Leaping Lizard, if you can pump up its toughness a little bit, with Roterothopter that might be Coral Reef, it might be Carapace. Or in white you could protect it with Sarah Paladin or say Might Alchemist. You can crash in and set up a situation where the opponent can't even double block you very effectively, or triple block with their little 1/1, 1/2 flyers, whatever. You can set up a situation where a 2/2 flyer can attack in pretty effectively. Applies to Leaping Lizard, also applies to Roterothopter. Not bad at all. Again, does not solve Giant Oyster. Still have to figure out Giant Oyster. All right, last card I'm going to talk about here is Serrated Arrows. So this is a common. It's a freaking common. It's 4 colorless mana. It's an artifact. It enters with 3 arrowhead counters. Beginning of your upkeep, if there's no arrowhead counters on it, you sacrifice it. Tap, remove an arrowhead counter from serrated arrows, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. That's at instant speed. Can do it, right away on turn 4 when you play this card. This is the piece of removal that just totally turns this format on its head. There were already some nails in the coffin for 1 toughness creatures, like Anaba Shaman and Dry Spell, but this one is so good that everyone's going to play it and it shows up in every color, and that just means you can't really play a 1 toughness creature in this format. Not really. Completely changes the way the game is played, can change combat math at instant speed. And there's no reason you couldn't have multiples of these on the battlefield. Serrated Arrows is a 5. Now, it might be a just slightly less powerful 5 than, Apocalypse Chime. Maybe Apocalypse Chime is a 5.0, maybe Serrated Arrows is a 4.9. Right, if you must draw a line between the two and delineate them. But Serrated Arrows, you should basically play every copy that you get. You know, 1/3 of this card kills a 1 toughness creature, 2/3 of this card kills a 2 toughness creature. It trades with Giant Oyster, which is kind of the best creature in the format. Right? Giant Oyster's got 3 toughness, so 1 run of Serrated Arrows will kill it. And Serrated Arrows plays incredibly nicely with other little removal spells, like Ironclaw Curse, Grandmother Singular, Dry Spell, Anaba Shaman, anything that changes the math just a little bit, damages the opponent's creature just a little bit. Serrated Arrows can push it 1 more point. And, having 2 or 3 Serrated Arrows out probably makes combat math impossible. I don't know how an opponent could find a profitable attack if you have 3 copies of Serrated Arrows on the battlefield that all have counters on them. So, this card is ridiculously good. Because of how valuable this card is, it pushes up the value of Joven a little bit. Right? Joven being able to blow up Serrated Arrows or his own tools makes him a very valuable play in the format. That raises the lot of red a little bit in Homelands. Red's pretty weak, but at least it has, these artifact answers that give it, some kind of neat functionality in the format. Anyway, Serrated Arrows is the card that you have to play around, and it's incredibly good. It's like a 5. And that brings us to the end of the list. So, kind of final thoughts here. Homelands is an interesting format, has some peculiar things that you have to play around in order to cobble together a deck. But once people have established the usual play patterns, you might be able to build an unusual deck, right? Once people realize how slow and impossible the format is, maybe there is a chance that you could sneak in with a green deck full of 1-drops and Spectral Bears and aggro somebody out, right? Once the format is settled a little bit like that, you can have some gotcha wins where the opponent is just playing as slow as can be and you make them sit up and take notice with a really unusual build. So I don't think the format is necessarily, totally solved. I think there's always some neat interaction that, once people have formed their ideas, that you can play against type on occasion and find a way through. So that's the Homelands Limited format. If I've brought you some value on this first day of April, then like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that jazz. And until next time, stay cool.